the evening rituals are really very important emotionally, and being able to participate in getting the child bathed and reading them stories and snuggling them to sleep in bed, those are really precious moments for a parent and for a child. They're part of the crucial glue that keeps those relationships going. And if you cut a parent out of those really precious moments, you diminish the opportunities to have a rich, deep, warm relationship.
This is the thing specifically that almost drove me, properly insane.
Mm-hmm.
The smell of my children in the house, tucking them up, going in to just make sure they're all right, kissing them goodnight, bathing, the bedtime story, the cuddles, the hot chocolate. That really almost drove me insane, that had just gone like that.
Easter, I remember him staying overnight, and for the first time I tucked him into bed, and this, that, and it was pitiful, really. It really was. I had nothing, and I tucked him into bed, and they went off to sleep, and I just sat there and watched them all night. I just watched them sleep. I hadn't seen this for 6 months. I hadn't been in this part of their life for 6 months. Tucking them up into bed and sleep. My son was 10 by then, but my daughter was only 6. And I just remember sitting there in this squalid little bedsit, looking at them and thinking, wow.
The whole issue of how much contact fathers have with their children is bound up with this issue of their intimacy with the children and their keeping in touch as the children grow up. We've looked at a very large sample of families, around 10,000 families, in which we looked at mothers' reports of how well their children were doing after separation. And essentially the story was exactly the same, that the children who saw more of their fathers, who had frequent and regular contact with their fathers, who felt close and involved with their fathers, were doing much better in terms of adjustment. There's a completely clear, unequivocal pattern of results. So it's in everybody's interest, I think, for fathers to be being a parent, even if they're on their own.
What's important is the continuation of the relationship and preserving that stability.
So if that is the norm for those children, moving between their dads, they're home with their dad, they're home with their mum, that is as stable psychologically for them as any other domestic device.
Well, and it doesn't have to have been the norm for the children. What's important is that the norm was that they had relationships with both parents. And it's preserving those relationships that's important. And I would argue that that's an issue of children's rights.
The more family that a child's got in their lives, the more family they see, and the more you tell that child, oh, you're wonderful, what a beautiful girl, what a handsome little boy, how clever you are, you're going to be top of the class. The more you tell a child that, they will grow and have confidence, and they'll feel stable, and they'll grow up being a better person for that.
The harm that this outdated, defunct family law causes to children, their fathers, and the extended families cannot be underestimated. Fractured families, scarred children, distraught grandparents. What have we become? We allowed this system to continue when we know the damage that it's doing. It breaks our hearts, destroys our children, it's ruinous for society, it makes the culture vulgar and perverse. It costs a fortune, and it flies in the face of everything we know as humans, that children love both of their parents, and in turn, both of their parents love them.
Life is empty and quiet. And all those times when you go, God, just give me an afternoon, breathing space, which most parents know. I actually long for the mess and the chaos and all the things that go with it.
The family justice system at its best will transform ordinary fathers into visiting MacDads, but at its worst, the system and those who run it will cut the ordinary father out of family life entirely. Based on nothing more than outdated social stereotypes, and despite everything that child experts say, the courts have become instruments of political social policy by insisting that the interests of the child are bound up in the best interests of the mother. So if you're a man, why have children if they're going to be taken from you upon separation? Why get married if for the rest of your life you become not much more than a wage slave, simply in order to see your child a few minutes a year? I suspect that if the law were as tilted towards men as it is now to women, we would behave in the same way. So it's little wonder that many women are tempted to abuse the system, all the while it works in their favour.
I had one mother who said to me, tell him, give me the money and he can have contact.
I mean, you're in front of this woman who's saying, he can see the kids if he gives me money. I mean, do you not just go, you fucking bitch?
Well, the problem is that when you're actually
Not to her
acting with
face.
someone, well, you probably think
I
it.
would. I'd be a crap lawyer. But
You think, well, this is the thing, because when you're acting with someone, there are boundaries the limits to what you can say. You can say, well, basically, I don't want to work for you anymore, because I mean, if you're not going to take the advice
But I mean,
I'm giving
internally,
you,
does your
oh, no, but
soul
you
not
do.
wither?
Well, you do. This is why it's a thankless task, and that's why I don't want to actually work
But
in that
you see,
environment.
I equally think it's human, her reaction.
Mm.
The law is allowing her to do this.
Women litigants are becoming or have become adept at manipulating the system, and the system is capable of being manipulated. And if someone is implacably hostile and simply won't give contact and brainwashes the child against the father, then there's very little one can do.
The judge makes an order for contact, the mother disobeys. What can the judge do? He can fine the mother or send her to prison. Now, typically she's got no money, so the fine isn't a possibility. So, to send her to prison, what does that do for the children?
The government is saying it will extend powers for judges beyond imprisonment. And the reason they're doing that is because now the mantra is, you know, if you put the mother in jail, how is that in the interests of the child? Well, it's in the interests of the child that when she gets out, she won't do it again. But the best this government can come up with, and this really does show the lack of intellectual rigour, the lack of imagination behind this claptrap, frankly, is that if a mother prevents contact, she might be made to pay the dad's expenses if he's booked a holiday. He doesn't want a fucking holiday. He wants to hold his child. 4 out of 10 mothers, that's 40%, admit to having obstructed contact between children and their fathers. And the family law system does nothing. Doing nothing nearly always means giving in to the mother, who of course is claiming all her demands are in the best interest of the children.
It's a form of moral laziness. They just make the decision that you know, mum's upset when dad has contact. Mum being upset is bad for the child, and so the court says, well, we better stop dad seeing child, even though he's done nothing wrong. I mean, that is a complete pattern. It happens time and time again, and it's actually the justification for taking a child overseas. Mum will be upset if she's not allowed to go and live in Australia. Therefore, she must be allowed to go and live in Australia. You know, we see that all the time, week in, week out. In my own case, I don't want to go on about my own case, but he lives in Japan. We have a great relationship. He came at Christmas. But I haven't seen him for 18 months, and I'm entirely dependent on his mother's goodwill, whether or not he comes. There's absolutely nothing else I can do. I can talk to him on the phone and so on, but you know, there's just endless such stories.
Do you have anxiety before he comes, or are you just, is it a longing, or is it a mixture?
Actually, very hard to describe, actually.
I mean, you know what happens is I don't actually. It's all off in a little zone somewhere, and I don't think about it. I shut it out. And then when he comes, it's great. And then he goes, and I've got to live up again for another year.